See, I didn't get them in. Oh. If you have your Bibles with you this morning, I invite you to open them to 1 Samuel 25. Many weeks ago, we began a sermon series in our morning services, Children's Stories for Adults. All good things have to come to an end sooner or later. Today is the last message in the series. If you would like to listen to any of the previous messages, if you'll go to YouTube, all of them are there, is my understanding. 1 Samuel 25. Today, the story of Abigail. You say, Pastor, you haven't done any ladies. Just one? That's today? That's it. Pastor, don't you like ladies? I sure do like ladies. I married one. Well, we're going to pick this up later, so if you're thinking that I didn't include enough ladies in this series, I promise you when we go to the second time around with this, I'll throw in a few more ladies. We love our ladies and certainly not slighting any of them. But the story of Abigail, 1 Samuel 25. Before we read the first three verses, how many of you have heard of Abigail in the Bible? Raise your hand. Okay? About half of you. So she is a forgotten lady in the Bible. Not many people know who she is. But when we leave here today, you're going to see why God paid her one of the greatest compliments He ever paid anybody, but especially a woman. 1 Samuel 25, the first three verses. Then Samuel died. Samuel was the Billy Graham of his day, a great prophet of God. The time has come that he has died. The Israelites gathered together and lamented for him, sorrowed for him, were saddened because of what had happened. And they buried him at his home in Ramah. And David arose and went down to the wilderness of Paran. Now there was a man in Maon whose business was in Carmel. And the man was rich. Is that what it says? Help me out. Very rich. Exceedingly rich. He was very, very rich. He had 3,000 sheep. That was his gold in that day. 1,000 goats. That was his silver. And he was shearing his sheep in Carmel. And then he would slaughter them for food later. The name of this man who was so rich, very rich, exceeding rich, was Nabal. And the name of his wife, Abigail. She was a woman of good understanding and beautiful appearance. Think about that. She was a wife, she was a woman, she was a lady of good understanding and a beautiful appearance. But the man, her husband, Nabal, was harsh and evil in his doings. He was of the house of Caleb. You don't know much about Abigail. Some of you don't know nothing about her. A few precious people looking at me right now would say, Pastor, I didn't even know she's in the Bible. But that's okay. Because God knew who she was. It doesn't matter who knows you down here. The one up there better know you. Because if he doesn't know you, it doesn't matter who you know down here. God knew Abigail. And as we're about to go into her story that will encompass 44 verses of 1 Samuel 25, He pays her one of the greatest compliments the Lord has ever paid a woman. He says of her in verse 3, she had great understanding and beautiful in appearance. You say, wait a minute, Pastor. Did God say that? He sure did. You say, but God didn't speak to her, did He? Yes, He did. He spoke to her like He speaks to us through His Word. Yes, God used men to write the Bible. He used their personality, He used their education, He used their experiences, He used their literary abilities, whatever they might be. But understand something. The Bible is God's book. And He ordained and orchestrated these writers of the Bible. The one who wrote 1 Samuel 25, the rest of the Bible. He inspired them. He guided them. He directed them to write exactly what He wanted to be said. So when we see that God is paying her a compliment through the writer of 1 Samuel, this is truly a compliment. Because He doesn't say it about anybody else in the Bible. He says she was a woman of great understanding and beautiful appearance. She was intelligent. She was attractive. She was brainy and she was beautiful. And we're going to look at her today. We're also going to, by way of looking at her, going to look at two other characters in the Bible. The first is her husband, Nabal. Everything Abigail was, he wasn't. Everything he was, she wasn't. He was a foolish, ugly husband. He was ugly on the outside, but he was more ugly on the inside. And then we're going to look at not only him, Abigail's husband, but we're going to look at David, who one day would be Israel's king. But right now, he's a man on the run. He's a fugitive. So we're looking at Abigail. We're going to look at her husband, Nabal. And we're going to look at David. Now, I'm going to ask you to do something. I'm going to ask you to go home today and read the whole chapter. Now, if you're not going to do that, then I'll have to read it here. 44 verses. And then after that, I'll have to take a 10-minute break. So you won't get out of here to noontime plus 3. Ever heard of noontime plus 3? That's 3 o'clock. So you're going to read the rest of it, correct? Shake your head. I thought so. Okay. But let me kind of capsulize and summarize the story found in 1 Samuel 25. As we begin, David is a fugitive, as I said earlier. He's a man on the run. He's hiding from the wicked king of Israel, whose name is Saul. King Saul is a madman. He's crazy. He's a murderer. He's homicidal. And he is trying to kill David. He's the king of Israel. But God is going to take the kingdom from him. And it's going to go to David. And King Saul knows that. But in his warped thinking, he thinks if he can kill David, then he will get to keep the kingdom. Just like people today think if you can shut up the mouth of a preacher, you can stop God from telling the truth. You can get rid of Jim Palmer, but somebody else will step into this pulpit and preach the truth. You can get rid of Scott Eady, but somebody else will step behind Scott and preach the truth. God is never without a prophet. And so David is a fugitive on the run from King Saul. And King Saul is looking for him. The Green Berets of Israel, the special forces of Israel, are on the move for David. As was customary in that day, as David is a fugitive in hiding, David has to feed the men that are with him. We don't know the exact number, but we do know probably it was close to 1,000 men. 1,000 men he's responsible for housing and for feeding. How would you like to be responsible for that many? He was. And so as he is in hiding, as he's a fugitive on the run, as he has a responsibility for over 1,000 people to make sure they have shelter over their head and food on the table, David strikes up an agreement which was very common in that day to offer protection services to Nepal. Nepal has livestock. He has goats. He has sheep. He has lambs. As I said, that was his gold and silver. And that's what he has that is valuable. And bandits are always trying to come and steal his livestock. You have marauding gangs that go through the area. They steal the goats, they steal the sheep, they steal the lambs. I also have bears going around. And bears have to eat too. And bears love a good pork chop. So they come and they eat from the flock. And so Nepal needs protection services for his livestock to protect them from being hauled off by the bandits and eaten by the bears. David comes to him and says, "Sir, would you like to enter into an agreement? I will guard your livestock. I and my men. We will make sure that no bandits steal. We will make sure that no bears eat. All I ask in return from you, sir, is that you feed my men. That you become food lion. And that you provide the rations for my men to eat. That's our agreement." Nepal said, "Fine, I agree to that." They didn't have any papers to sign. It was a gentleman's agreement, eye to eye, chest to chest, hand to hand. The deal was made. Nepal was an ugly man, as I told you. Not only ugly on the outside, but uglier on the inside. He was crooked, he was corrupt, and he was conniving. And when the time came to supply the food to David that he promised, he renegaded on the deal. He sent David a message, and he said, "No food on the message. Go hungry on the message. No lamb chops for you, no figs for you, no grapes for you, no butter for you, no hot biscuits for you. No olive oil for you, no honey for you. I'm not feeding you one single thing. Deal off. No food, go hungry. And if you don't like it, David, you can lump it." Well, David has red hair. And people with red hair have short fuses. And David had a short fuse. He's already tired and hungry and cold and wet from having to run continually from King Saul and his men. The responsibility is wearing him down and wearing him out. And all he needs now is to be insulted, to be lied to and cheated on, to be laughed at. And so David decides he's going to do something about it. His eyes are fiery. His spirit is in a rage. He gathers up 400 of his soldiers. He said, "We're not going for a pleasure ride. Get your swords, get your spears, get your bow and arrows. We're going to the estate of Nepal. And we're going to go and we're going to take a pound out of his hide." How dare him break the agreement? How dare him insult me? How dare him to lie and cheat on me? How dare him? And so David and 400 soldiers are on the way to the estate of Nepal. They're going to kill Nepal, and they're going to kill every male that is there, family or servant. They are going to take no prisoners, show no mercy, give no quarter. David is raging. You say, Pastor, I thought he was a man after God's own heart. How could he do that? I thought Christian men are Mr. Militoses and Casper the Friendly Ghost, and they just lay down and let people walk all over them. I think Christian men need to be diplomatic, they need to be polite, they need to be courteous, they need to be respectful. But they're men. And David was a man, his blood run hot, somebody has insulted him, he's going to do something about it. And so with 400 men, he heads to the estate. Nepal's wife, his name Abigail. In that day, she is not treated like a wife should have been treated. She was treated probably like a servant. Her husband never discussed anything with her. They never had any conversation about anything. She was just a servant. At least that's how he treated her. And she gets word of what he's done. One of the other servants comes and said, Abigail, what are we going to do? David is on the way. With 400 men, he's going to kill your husband. He's going to kill all the males that are here. What are we going to do? And Abigail says, I don't know nothing about it, but we better do something. So she jumps into action. And she puts together a camel train. A train of camels, one after another, after another, after another. And she loads them up with food. She cleans out the refrigerator. She cleans out the freezer. She cleans out the food storage shelves. She puts those pork chops on camel 1. She puts that honey and olive oil on number 2. She puts the figs and raisins and dates on another. She loads up that camel caravan of food. And she goes out to meet David. David is coming her way. She's going to go out and she's going to meet him before he gets there. The story continues if you're reading 1 Samuel 25. That when she runs into David, she shows why she was such a beautiful woman. She shows why she had such great intelligence, brains and beauty. With humility, with respect, with charm, with compliments, with goodness, with kindness, Abigail speaks to David. Now, I would venture that if she had been a man, he would have killed her. But he saw her coming, a woman leading this caravan, carrying food for him and his men. And she, leading the caravan, gets off the camel, falls to her knees, and speaks to him. Speaks to him with honor, speaks to him words that are positive and praiseful, respectful, mannered, soft, calming. And David is impressed. The way she talks to him should be taught in every ladies' class in every church. Because I'm telling you, she understood how you talk to people. How you talk to a husband. How do you talk to a father? How you talk to a man. And she honored him. She respected David. She inspired him. And she stole his heart. David, I think, fell in love with her. I don't believe he had ever seen in his lifetime, and never would see in his lifetime, a combination of brains and beauty that Abigail brought to the table. David does not carry out his intention to kill her husband. And I think it's when she said, David, take my life and let my husband go. I think that's when he changed his mind. So she gives David the food. David turns around and goes back. And she goes back to the estate. You would think her husband would have gratitude. You would think her husband would be thankful that she went through all of this effort to save his life. But he's not. He's a drunkard. He's profane. He's vulgar. He's dark. He's moody. He's selfish. He's abusive. And when he's through pouring out on her, he leaves. That was his thank you to her. Well, God steps in at this point and strikes Nepal with heart disease, or a heart attack is a better way to say it, or with a stroke, or with both. Knocks him down, and he's in the bed for 10 days, and there's not a doctor in this world that can help him. And 10 days after he's struck and he lies in that bed, he goes into eternity. Abigail is now a widow. David hears about her husband's death. David calls for her to come. David proposes marriage to her. That's why I said it was love at first sight, I think. And she agrees, and Abigail becomes the wife of David. Her name means a cause of joy. David really needed some joy in his life at this time because, again, he's a fugitive on the run with great responsibilities. Now that's the story. Pretty plain, simple story. Boys and girls could understand it without a problem. But remember, the stories that we read to our children are not just for them, they're for us. What is God trying to say to you and I today about this simple story that I say has some profound lessons to teach? With our time remaining, I'm going to teach you those lessons. This is what we can learn from 1 Samuel 25, the story of Abigail. Yes, a simple story, but a profound story. Lesson number 1. There is more to marriage than money. America has a God. It's money. And millions upon millions upon millions of Americans bend their knee and bow their head and profess their service to the almighty dollar. We think that money is the answer to everything. And it's the answer to very few things, to truth be known. So lesson number 1, there's more to marriage than money. Now you might say, well, Pastor, what's that got to do with the story? Well, I'm going to tell you a little bit. Now pay attention. Abigail and Nepal, they went to a matchmaker. Now, not really, but if they would have, you would have never found two people so totally different. If you were a matchmaker and you put those two together, you ought to be fired. Better than that, you ought to be taken out and shot. Because those two people that are married in 1 Samuel 25 are as different as night and day. She's light, he's dark. She's sweet, he's sour. She's beautiful on the outside, he's ugly on the outside. She's beautiful on the inside, he's ugly on the inside. She's soft-spoken, he's a loudmouth. She's unselfish, she's gracious, she's kind. He's selfish and narcissistic and prideful. She doesn't drink alcohol. He drinks too much of it. She's faithful to him as a wife. He runs around on her, no doubt. He's mean, Mr. Mustard. And yet these two are married as husband and wife. How in the world did this happen? How could someone like Abigail, who loves the Lord and loves people and loves life, marry herself to a man who does have no use for God? who has no use for others except himself, who's all about him. How did this take place? It was an arranged marriage. In that day, it was a common thing for the parents of a girl, when she became of age to be a bride, to put her out on the market, to put her in the Sears catalog of that day, to put pictures of her up around town. She's now available to the highest bidder. She doesn't get a choice in this matter. She doesn't make a decision in this matter. Her parents make the decision. And they put her available. Whoever has the price to pay, they will get her. Abigail probably came from a home that was very poor. Not a lot of money, but a lot of virtue and character. And her parents probably are seeing her as a ticket out of poverty. You say, how could they do that? Well, listen, that's just the way it was then. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It's just the way it was. And so Nepal couldn't find a wife on his own, obviously. So he looks up there and he sees Abigail, $50,000. That's no problem for him. So he goes and he pays $50,000, and she is forced to marry him and become his wife. You say, wow, that's pretty good. She's moving up to the penthouse. She's going to drive a Mercedes. She's going to get to order clothes from that fancy Italian magazine that doesn't have English in it. She's going to get to go to Halls and Oscars and Laura's and eat. She's going to jet set for here to there. She's got it made. She married into money. But money can't make you happy. Are you listening to me, ladies? Money can't make you happy. Money can't substitute for love. Man and woman sitting on a plane together. Man looks down and sees on the woman sitting next to him, her ring finger, the biggest diamond he's ever seen. I mean, that thing looks like a softball sitting up there. And he says, ma'am, can I ask you a question? That wouldn't happen to be the Hope Diamond, would it? And she says, oh no, it's not the Hope Diamond, it's the Clubman Diamond. And the man said, well, ma'am, the Hope Diamond had a curse that went with it. Does this diamond have a curse too? And she said, yes, it does, Mr. Clubman. When you marry for money, you will be cursed. You'll find no happiness in that marriage. You'll find no love in that marriage. Abigail didn't find it. It's not her fault. But for you and I who can make those choices, and many of us have already made them, some of us haven't. Don't marry for money. It will not make you happy. It will only make you miserable and sad. Marry out of love. Love. Want to have a happy marriage? Live in 3 homes. Did you say homes, Pastor? Live in 3 homes and you'll have a happy marriage? Absolutely. A family home filled with love. Live in that home. A church home filled with love. Live in that home. And make preparation for a heavenly home where one day you will live in love too. A home filled with love. A church filled with love. That leads to a heaven filled with love. And all of that love comes from a relationship with Jesus Christ, who is love. God is love. Jesus Christ is love. There's no greater virtue than love. And yet sometimes we marry for all the wrong reasons. And one day it'll come back to be a curse to you. Secondly, another lesson here. There is power in words. As I said earlier, there ought to be a class taught on how to talk to people. As Abigail talks to David. As Abigail was the wife to her husband. There's power in words. When Abigail meets David, she meets him with kind words. David hasn't heard a lot of kind words. He's a fugitive on the run. He's been cursed at. He's been fussed at. But she meets him with kind words. Respectful words, humble words, calming words, wise words. If you'll notice when you read 1 Samuel 25, she has a name for David she repeatedly calls him. She calls him Lord. Now I know some of you who might be women feminists will say, I ain't calling no man Lord. Well, that's why you won't get a man like David. She wasn't dishonoring herself. She wasn't lowering herself. She wasn't showing disrespect to herself. She was rather showing it to a man who one day was going to be the king of Israel. Did you hear that? She knew one day that man was destined to be used of God as the king of Israel. How did she know that? How did Abigail know that? She didn't read the Gazette. She didn't turn on Fox News. She didn't hear it through the grapevine. She had a relationship with God, and God spoke to her and said, you bend your knee to Him. He's your earthly Lord. One day He will be your king. So she calls Him Lord. She honors Him. She inspires him by saying, David, you're going to be king one day. Why do you want to put a blight on your record of killing a man that's not worth killing, my husband? Why do you want to murder him? Yes, he's a fool. Yes, he is wicked to the core, but he doesn't deserve to be murdered. And neither do the servants that work for him. They don't understand all this, David. If you want to kill somebody, kill me, but don't kill him. Don't put this on your record. Wow. She knew how to talk to people. Words are not neutral, ladies and gentlemen. They either build up or they tear down. That's why God in His wisdom gave us a mouth. Mouth has lips. Those lips sealed. Right? Can you do that? Can you seal your lips? And inside those sealed lips, there's a picket fence called your teeth. So not only can you seal your lips, but you can keep the fence up of your teeth. And you can close your mouth. You know why God went to all that trouble to close our mouth, put a seal on our lips and a fence on our teeth? Because He wants us to watch what we say. Because what you say can do irreparable damage to people. Or it can do irreparable good to people. Words have impact. And Abigail's words diffused David's anger, made him think about he was going to be the king one day. He did not want to have a murder charge resting on his resume. She called him Lord. And the fact of this beautiful woman on her knees and before David, I believe she wept, and I believe David wept with her. Two of the greatest orators of the 20th century. One was an evangelist, a man anointed of God, as very few evangelists have ever been anointed. The words that he spoke were authoritative words that came from the Bible. He pointed men to a Savior named Jesus and to a place called heaven. Told them how they could have a relationship with Jesus. How one day that heaven can be their home. The other, well, he was also a great speaker, a great orator. If you ever watch him on film, people would sit on the edge of their seat, not with their back to the seat, they sat on the edge of the seat. They hung on every word he said. He got them aroused. He got them fired up. But he didn't talk to them about Jesus. He talked to them about hate, hostility, destruction, death. He didn't point them to salvation. He pointed them to, pardon my language, damnation. He didn't point them to heaven. He pointed them to hell. Both used words. Billy Graham and Adolf Hitler. Don't tell me that words that you and I speak don't have impact. They do. Ronald Reagan used words to inspire a country. His predecessor used words to tell the country that we were in a malaise. Words matter because they determine a destiny sometimes. Thirdly, we're looking at lessons here. Money doesn't make for a happy marriage. Love does. Love of Christ that leads to a love of others. Words matter. What you say to your boys and girls, your grandchildren, your parents, they matter. You may not remember them 30 years from now, but they will. I've had people sit in my office and tell me things that their dad said to them or their mom said to them or somebody said to them that crushed them. And they have never forgotten it. Never forgotten it. Words matter. Thirdly, it's possible to have peace and joy and hope even in the worst of situations. It's possible to have peace. It's possible to have joy. It's possible to have hope. It's possible to have contentment, to have satisfaction. Even when your life and the place of your life is very difficult. I mean, think about Abigail. Every day she had to be married to that jerk. A mean man, a selfish man, an abusive man, an ugly man. What would you have done if you were there? You don't have to answer me out loud, but if you were there, what would you have done? Would you have bought into the lie that says if you want to have peace, you got to go find it out there? If you want to have joy, you got to go find it out there. If you want to have hope, you got to go find it out there. It's found in a pill, it's found in a bottle, it's found in the bed, it's found at the amusement park. Do you believe that? Or do you believe that peace, joy, and hope comes from a living God in heaven who gives it to those who are willing to trust and obey Him? That it doesn't matter how bad the situation or circumstance is. His peace can override it. His joy can override it. His hope can override it. Abigail could have left him. She could have fought with him. She could have joined him. She could have cheated on him. But she didn't do any of that. Every morning she got up. She presented herself well. She spoke well. She did the things that a wife is supposed to do, a mother's supposed to do. When he cussed at her, she didn't cuss back. When he abused her, she didn't fight back. Now, if she would have physically abused him and she needed to leave, that's another thing. But she knew when to talk and when to be quiet, when to speak, when not to speak, what to say, what not to say. Because she didn't expect anything out of him, because peace doesn't come from him. And you say, well, I got a great spouse. I'm glad you do, but you can't get peace from them either. You can't get joy from them either. You can't get hope from them either. There is no peace, joy, and hope that comes from this world. It comes from that world. It doesn't come through anything this world can give you. It comes from what the Lord Jesus Christ can give you. Corrie ten Boom was in Ravensbrück, a Nazi concentration camp. You don't get any harder than that, any more difficult than that, any more horrible than that. Yet she was a woman of peace. She was a woman of joy. She was a wonder of hope. How in the world did she get it at a concentration camp? Because God gave it to her. Alexander Solzhenitsyn was in a jail in Siberia, a prison camp that if you went to, you never came back except in a box horizontal. How did he find peace and joy and hope there? It was through Jesus Christ. Howard Rutledge spent 7 years as a shot-down pilot in the Hanoi Hilton of North Vietnam. Rats and roaches, sewage, darkness. How did he make it through? Because God gave him peace, joy, and hope. I don't know where you're at right now as you're looking at for me. You might say, Pastor, you don't know how bad my situation is. You don't know how difficult my circumstance is. I need to get me another man. I need to get me another wife. I need to get me another house. I need to get me another car. I need to get this. I need to get that. I need more money. I need... Blah, 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 blah. Listen to me. You'll never find what you're looking for till you go there. And Abigail found what she needed in Jesus Christ to put up with him. She was a submissive servant this way, but more importantly that way. Lesson number 4, and we're done. Make a difference wherever God puts you in this life that you live. Make a difference. Abigail made a difference. She spoke to her husband. He will have no excuse on Judgment Day when he stands before the living God and he'll say, well, you never sent a preacher to me. You never sent a prophet to me. You never sent Scott Eady to me. You never sent Billy Graham to me. If you would have sent somebody like that, I'd have listened to him. I'd have got saved. God, it's your fault. And God's going to say, no, it's not. I gave you a beautiful wife who testified to you every day of your marriage of her love for God, and you needed to love God. Sir, you have no excuse, God will say. You see, God puts us in a place, even difficult places, adverse situation places, because He's got somebody He wants us to minister to. There's somebody right now in the circle that you find yourself in that God has given you to minister to. It might be your children. Maybe your children, God has given you access to them as a grandparent, that you might do something in their life that nobody else can do or ever will do. Maybe there's a neighborhood child that just constantly is outside, even in your yard. I just wonder if God isn't saying, maybe you should spend some time with that child. Maybe that child has been put there by God that you would speak to them. Maybe that sick person over there battling with cancer. Maybe God has put them into your life that you might be able to give them some hope and encouragement that nobody else can. Maybe there's a lady that's untaught. She was not raised in a home. She doesn't know how to be a wife. She doesn't know how to be a mother. She doesn't know how to boil water. She doesn't know how to clean a house. But she wants to. And maybe some of you dear ladies, she's sitting next to you. She comes and she's around you, and you could make a profound difference in her life By just saying, listen, I'm going to be your teacher. I'm going to help you do what you were never taught to do, that you can be a wife and a mother to your own children and one day teach them. You see, we go through life and we somehow miss what God's doing because we don't have our spiritual glasses on to see these people are not there by accident. God has put them in our path and give them to us, that even though we're going through difficult times ourselves, we can pour into them. And maybe the difficult times will end when we do what God wants us to do. And one day, by the way, God will deliver you. Abigail said, I want out of this, but I can't disobey my God and I can't dishonor my husband. So there's times when God will just step in and He'll set you free. He set her free. 10 days lying flat on his back, you would think that would have changed the man. I guess he kept cussing and drinking, and God said, listen, enough's enough. Took him home. Or let me just say, took him into eternity. He didn't go home. God can change things quickly. You don't have to do it. God can do it. Heads are bowed and eyes are closed.